Hello. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm extremely thrilled and proud to invite you all to Foundation for India Studies Distinguished Lecture. This year's lecture is going to be on India-Israel relationship and the current geopolitical climate. And to give you a little bit more context and to kind of explain what FIS as an organization is about, I want to invite Krishna Vavilala, who's FIS's chairman and director and one of the founding members. So if everyone could please give Mr. Vavilala a round of applause, and we'll invite him out of the stage.
Good afternoon. Foundation for India Study is a non-profit organization established in USA, and we are here to promote relationships between India and United States. And we have several projects. One of them is the India Studies program. We were instrumental in starting it in University of Houston in the year 2006. And ever since, we celebrated anniversaries in UOPET also. And we are not only connected with UOPET, we are prepared to institute the India Studies programs which our university is interested in. Now, we also have other projects like the Indo-American oral history project. And that is a project conceived to capture the memories of the first generation Indian immigrants in Houston. And we have signed MOUs with the Houston Public Library and Houston Community College, and we have done so far more than 55 interviews immigrants in Houston. And of late, we also have an understanding with Gilad University in Mexico, and they are interested in capturing the memories of the immigrants who were affected by the partition of India. These are history projects, And of late, we also have understanding with the South Asian American Digital Archives in Sri Lanka. Those are our signature projects. And of course, we also participate in Martin Luther King Parade many couple of times. I myself wore the dress of Mahatma Gandhi and walked in downtown to connect the grassroots Americans with Indian community. Then, as you know, this is also part of distinguished lecture series. We have had about 15 distinguished lecturers, and we conducted them in various locations. The very outstanding individuals came and spoke on the platform. One of them was T.P. Srinivasan, ambassador to the United Nations. Then Professor George Sudarshan, who was the nominee for Nobel Prize. And of course, recently, Professor Kleinberg of Rice University also spoke on our platform. Then we also have another project which we are working on with the Houston Public Library to celebrate the Indo-American heritage. And that will be tentatively fixed for May 12th. So hopefully you all will hear more details in the coming months. And I must really thank you all for being here on a Sunday afternoon instead of watching a backroom game on TV or having a nice nap. So, and I'm particularly grateful to Mr. Gilad Katz, the Consul General of Israel, and Dr. Anupam Ray for being here. Made a point to be here on time and they came, and in spite of their several engagements in the town. I believe there is a very large celebration in the Jewish community in Houston that is called Yom Kippur. So that is an educational program, and I'm glad that Consul General of Israel is here for despite that. Now, Israel and India have been having close relationships ever since they were formed as nations. Of course, India got independence, became a nation in 1947, and a year later, Israel got its nationhood. All these years, India and Israel had several collaborations and various bits, which I would leave that to Mr. Gilad Katz to explain, and also Dr. Anupam Ray. Recently, as you all read in the newspapers, the Prime Minister of Israel went to India, had an overwhelming reception by Prime Minister Modi, and that became a worldwide event. And they signed several agreements, I believe, all of which we are not aware of because they don't publish in the newspapers. But I'm sure today's lecture will focus some knowledge, some light on those agreements. First, we all stand here with strong cooperation in areas of technology, commerce, and defense, intelligence, etc. with Israel. And we look forward to having more and more cooperation with the two countries. Now I look forward to hearing from our esteemed guests here about their perspective growing these relationships in the future. Thank you very much. I invite our special guests to come on the stage and take their seats. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Krishna, for giving some context about why all of us are here and why the relationship between India and Israel is so important. And now if I could please invite both of the Consul Generals to take the stage. We're going to shortly hear from them. Please, round of applause. So as we begin, I want to start by introducing Mr. Gilad Katz. As the Consul General of Israel to the Southwest United States, Mr. Katz manages the relationship between the state of Israel and the American Southwest. So that includes Texas and states around this area. And the consulate is located in Houston. And Mr. Katz actually just recently came to Houston, so he's a newcomer, and I want everyone to give him a strong Texan Houstonian welcome. So Mr. Katz has had an extremely distinguished career, and if I had all day to spend talking about it, I really could, but in the sake of brevity and in the sake of respecting his valuable time, I'm just going to give you a short summary of his life and of his achievements. So before he was the Consul General, Mr. Katz was a advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So he spent a number of years as in the Hebrew Correspondence Department and in the Public Affairs Department. Before he joined the Prime Minister's office, he was a correspondent for Makar Rishon, which is an Israeli newspaper, and he garnered praise as a political and a diplomatic correspondent. Before then, he was a public representative in the Directorate of Education Corporation for the local council of Shoham, Israel, where he was a tireless education policy advocate. Mr. Katz has also been a member of the elite paratrooper team Zanahim, and he was in Israel's reserve paratrooper division from 1985 until 2010. So he has over 2 decades of experience in the military as well. Mr. Katz is also extremely well educated. He has completed both his graduate and his undergraduate studies at Bar Ilan University. He holds master's degrees in political science and communications and bachelor's degrees in political science, communications, and history. So Mr. Katz is an extremely distinguished and honored guest, and we're extremely pleased to have him here. So if I could now introduce Mr. Katz to come up to the stage.
I didn't know, or I should say differently, I would like to know the person we just talked about. Thank you very much, Anupam, my friend. I just told Anupam that I think in the last half a year I'm here, I have more pictures with him than one with my wife. But don't tell her I said. Anyway, I'm very happy to be here with you. I think that it's not only on an interest level, we're talking, I think, in my point of view, it's on a personal level, and I really do thank all of you that you invited us. It's a privilege for me, it's an honor for me, and hopefully we'll see what we can do to try and have our, how should I say, retreat with the Israeli-Indian relationship in the coming future, hopefully. Before starting my speech, I would like to say a few words to try and describe accurately the process that eventually led us to where the relationship between Israel and India stand today. One has to emphasize a few key data items that will help us to understand the significant accomplishment of the two current leaders, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. In first sight, it seems that there are no two countries and cultures that are so distant apart one from the other. India is a subcontinent, both geographically. Its size is 3,287,263 square kilometers, the seventh largest country in the world, and demographically, of course, close to 1,300,000,000 citizens. Second populated country in the world. Whereas Israel is considered to be a quite small country, geographically 20,770 square kilometers. Number 154 largest country in the world. As well as demographically 8,300,000 citizens. Number 97 most populated country in the world. Therefore, comparing the two is like resembling a fly to an elephant. But, and this is a very big but, there are a few crucial similarities between our two countries. Israel and India are two of the three ancient peoples and cultures existing today. The third nation is, of course, the Chinese people. Another important similarity between us two has an important impact, and in my eyes, will have even more impact in the coming years. Both in India and in Israel, the largest group in the population is the young population. Below age 30, it constitutes around 40% of the population. This single piece of data can explain why both our countries have not only a great present, but mainly a great future. And now I can officially start my speech. We all know that the official signing ceremony that started the diplomatic ties between our two countries, and I'm talking about official ties, took place on the last week of January 1992. What most people don't know is that a half a year prior to the signing ceremony occurred a tragic terror attack that at the end of the day had a positive and crucial influence upon the decision makers in Jerusalem and Delhi. On June 1991, in a city by the name of Singh, in the Kashmir province, a group of Muslim terrorists attacked a few Israeli backpackers, killing one, injuring two, and kidnapping one. During the days and weeks of restless efforts to release the Israeli hostage, a very senior Israeli diplomat arrived to India, and amongst all his actions involving the hostage, he met senior Indian diplomats. During those meetings, both sides were convinced that it is time to upgrade the relations between the two countries. messages were sent back and forth from both capitals. And the mutual feelings was that the time is right for setting official diplomatic relations between the two countries. And that's exactly what happened. A few months went by, discreet phone calls, meetings, and agreements were made behind the scene, and on the 29th of January 1992, the CEO of the Foreign Ministry of India those days announced on a special press conference where he revealed the official, formal, and open diplomatic ties between the two countries. During the last 25 years, India has become not only an ally of Israel. India is a strategic partner of Israel. Since May 2014, when Modi was elected for office, the relationship has been tightened and deepened. There are two main reasons for that. First, ideology, meaning both leaders share the same values and beliefs. Second, chemistry, meaning both leaders get along with each other and they are true friends. I would like to emphasize the importance of personal relations between leaders. This is astonishing. According to Israeli protocol, the one and only political figure that receives the utmost honor and respect is the President of the United States. What that means is that the Prime Minister welcomes the President personally at the airport. He also escorts him during his home visit. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu decided to grant Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, the same attention and honor as the President of the United States. What that means is plain and simple. The State of Israel recognizes Modi not only as the leader of a superpower, but Israel sees Modi and the Indian peoples as close and personal friends and allies of the State of Israel and of the people of Israel. This special attitude is preserved only to leaders that we, Israel, consider them as strategic partners of the State of Israel. So I think everyone understands now that during the past 25 years, India has shifted from just another country to an important ally, from there to a major interest for Israel, and today we see India as a strategic partner alongside the United States. I think that speaks for itself. When talking about Israel-India relationship, we talk about relations that lean on two strong feet. The first one is trade. The second one is research and development. To illustrate the depth and strength of our economic relationship, I would like to note out a few milestone numbers that portray the importance Israel refers to India. 20 years ago, just 20 years ago, in the early 1990s, the scope of the economic ties between the two countries totaled to around $180 million. Today, 25 years later, we are looking at ties worth more than $5 billion. And what is more interesting, this is, I think, unbelievable and amazing, is that the export and import between the two countries is almost equal. Around $2.4 billion import from India to Israel, and around $2.6 billion export from Israel to India. These numbers show not only the dramatic growth during the years, but it also indicates the balance, and that is important, the balance and the reciprocity between our two economies. Many do know that during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel, 12 agreements were signed by private companies of the two countries. 4 related to defense, 2 to civil aviation, and 1 each to medicine, infrastructure, water, renewable energy, and innovation. Moreover, in the past years, more than 25 centers of excellence were established in India with Israeli expertise. These centers have one main goal: to try and bring a dramatic change that will benefit and affect the economic well-being of millions of Indians. Another indication that can explain why we define our relationship as strategic has to do with the simple fact that a large portion of our ties focus on defense and military agreements. That is true and well known, and I prefer not to go into more details on this subject. To conclude, it is obvious to us, Israelis and Indians, but moreover, and I think this is crucial, because if it was only between us, that's one thing, but if it is well known, it's a different thing. I mean, it is well known to the international community that our two countries have a variety of mutual interests, and above these interests are two peoples that share the same values. And our two leaders, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, are true friends. And I allow myself to say that I see Anupam as my personal friend. And since I feel at home between you, I can say frankly that one of my personal dreams is to visit India. My wife was in India already, and she always teases me why I haven't been there. It is my turn now. I told her that. She knows that. We're just waiting for the proper time. I thank you all for inviting and hosting me. Please God, our good and tight relations will deepen and widen in the coming years. Thank you very much.
All right, let's get one more round of applause for Mr. Gilad Katz. Wonderful speech. And now it's my sincere pleasure to once again invite another esteemed dignitary of this nation and of India to the stage, Dr. Anupam Ray. So just like Mr. Katz, Dr. Ray has an extremely colored background, is extremely well educated, and has lived a life of many men rolled up in one. So I think, as you'll see when I'm done with this introduction, I could have gone on all day once again. So as Consul General of India to the Southwest United States, Dr. Ray manages the relationship between India and the American Southwest. Once again, this is located in Texas, and the consulate is actually in Houston, as I'm sure all of you know. So before Dr. Ray was a dignitary, he was a neurosurgery resident in India. So not only is he a diplomat, he's a doctor as well. And after joining his residency, he joined the prestigious Indian Foreign Service in 1994. As a diplomat, Dr. Ray has held positions in Germany, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. He managed India's bid for the Commonwealth Secretary General out of London. He was the senior member of India's team on the UN Security Council in New York. Dr. Ray was the first employee of India's Development Partnership Administration, and later as a joint secretary in the government of India, he kickstarted India's Nalanda University, which is a $500 million project to create a university, a full access university in India for Asia, which is pretty amazing. Dr. Ray has served as chief of staffs to ministers, directors of the Foreign Office, and was deputy coordinator of the 2012 BRICS Summit in New Delhi. Dr. Ray has been a fellow at the Center of Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., and was a visiting professor at the Patterson School of Diplomacy and International Commerce at the University of Kentucky. In addition to his medical degree, Dr. Ray has an MA in public administration. So please give a warm round of applause to Dr. Ray.
Good afternoon. Namaskar and shalom. Good to be back in India House. Good to be back amongst many familiar faces. I thank you, the Foundation for India Studies, for having all this. That you do good work, and important work. It's a very impressive portfolio that you have developed over time, and I wish that you carry on and continue to build on it. I'm happy to do whatever I can. I must tell you that I was cursing my luck because Gilad, for whom I have great admiration for, has just taken my speech. So I was busy sitting and scribbling about what I would have to say. Now you're lucky because my speech was 1 hour, now it's down to 15 minutes. So it has both pluses and minuses. It is my deep privilege, it is a great honor for me to speak after my distinguished colleague from Israel, a former paratrooper. You know, it takes a lot to be a paratrooper in Israel. They are, in a nation of warriors, they are the finest warriors. So, a highly educated man, and as you could see from the quality of his speech, I believe, I'm told, a little bird told me that he was the speechwriter to the Prime Minister of Israel. So there's a very hard act for me to follow. And I feel, and I'd like to reiterate that I don't believe that there can be a better representative of Israel than my good friend here. I'm thankful to the Indian community that you have made him feel welcome here. I appreciate it, and I hope that you will continue to do so. The Israelis are our friends, and they are our very good friends. I thought I would say this later, but many of you are part of the Indian diaspora. The word diaspora actually comes from the experience of the Jewish community. And like the Jewish diaspora, which has been out for 2,000 years, you are also one of the great diasporas of the world. And not only should Israel and India be friends, I hope that the diasporas will be friends. This is very, very important. Now I have had to, as I said, because Gilad has already spoken most of the things that I wanted to say. So I'll tell you a story. I'm a student of military history, and this is something I find fascinating. And because I believe that war tells you more about the character of a nation than any other thing. Characters are not very easy to define, but there are tendencies and traits which you can gather, which you can patterns which you can see in those traits and tendencies. So one of the most powerful pictures that I have seen is that of the surrender ceremony of the Pakistani forces in December 1971, after the liberation of Bangladesh. The commander-in-chief of the Indian forces in India was General Jagjit Singh Arora. He served under a RC Chief of Staff, Field Marshal Shan Manekshaw. If you see that picture, the most interesting person is neither of the two. The most interesting person in that picture is standing behind him, and his name is General Jacob Fall Raphael Jacob. He's a Jew. Now, India is probably one of the few countries in the world, if not the only country in the world, where a Sikh general, a Parsi field marshal, and a Jew general can fight and win a war. You want a war. 60,000 prisoners and left victorious and glorious. We did not take what was, we defeated an enemy and decimated them in a style that we learned from the Israelis during the 1967 war. Now, General Jacob, like me, grew up in Calcutta. And when I grew up in Calcutta, our favorite bakery was a bakery called Nahum's. We bought all our electrical supplies in a street called Ezra Street. And there was a very famous school which was called the Warren Goldsmith School. Now, as a young man, many of us used to hang around Warren Goldsmith School. But it was a difficult school to get into, and it was set up by Jews who had come to Calcutta, Baghdadi Jews. The same Baghdadi Jewish community set up the Sassoon docks in Mumbai. So the point I'm trying to make is that we are not unfamiliar with Jewish culture. We are familiar with it. It's one of the few, India is one of the few countries in the world where Jews have always been welcome. Always. Jewish people are old people. Israel is a young nation. The Jewish people lived in exile for 2,000 years, or longer, before they, it was a slow and painful process. They brought them back to their historical home. The way they reconstructed their home is a subject of great admiration for me personally and for us as a nation. They faced impossible odds in turning this into a nation. We too, like the Jews, are ancient people and a young nation. We are, as my good friend has pointed out, we too are thousands of years old, but we too are a 70-year nation. During the 70-year journey, our paths have been pretty much, we are the same age as a nation. And he pointed out the disparities in terms of size, but I'll tell you something. You take our population, we will take our Nobel laureates. We have great admiration for the people of Israel. And yesterday, when I was researching what I had to say today, I looked up Prime Minister Netanyahu's addresses. And he said that there are three common factors on which the Indian and Israeli relationship is built. One, he said, of course, is that the first is our culture, and I'll quote from him because he actually said it very well, and I don't know if my friend helped him write that, but if he did, then I'm stealing his words. Our two cultures are amongst the most ancient cultures in the world, and that is the true foundation through which we embrace the future together. Very significant. That the future that we are embracing is based on our past. It is not a relationship of convenience. It is very important to understand this. Their culture is built on philosophy, wisdom, literature. Every word is, I think, is important in this. Philosophy, wisdom, literature, the pursuit of truth, and the quest for the secret of life and the secrets of the universe. I think these are very profound words. The second commitment between us is our commitment to democracy. And there is a third connection, and that is the technological scientific connection. I will dwell a little bit on each of these. On culture, so I go to Jerusalem once a year. I'll be going there again in 2 weeks' time. I try to go once a year. And every time I go there, I go to the Wailing Wall. And the feeling that I have with the Wailing Wall is the same feeling that I have when I go to Varanasi or Nalanda. It is a feeling that you are in the midst of a culture, a civilization which is thousands of years old, which has gone through ups and downs, highs and lows. We are both people that have endured historical cycles that go into centuries, hundreds of years each time. We have periods in which we have suffered for hundreds of years. But through it all, like the Jewish and the Israeli people, we have also held true to our faith, stayed, believed in India, believed we too have a holy land. Their holy land is Israel, our holy land is India. Fortunately for us, we have never been evicted from our holy land. Fortunately, I understand how painful it is to have been evicted from that. he said that my good friend talked about the Indians, the Indian civilization, the Jewish civilization, and the Chinese civilization. There is another similarity, another very, very extraordinary similarity. There are 5 great religions in the world: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. Amongst, taken together, they account for, say, 90% of the world's population. Now, think of where they came from. All these religions in the world came from only 2 countries. Jerusalem is the holiest city of 3 great religions in the world, and Hinduism and Buddhism came from India. India and Israel together are the home of virtually all religions in the world. And there are other similarities, as I can assure you that those of you I see in India, most of you want your children and grandchildren to be doctors, engineers, and lawyers. Nothing else is permissible. I can tell you that it is similar in an Israeli home. Mothers, grandmothers, everybody. And now this betokens a much deeper similarity. That is a respect for education, a respect for learning, and more importantly, I think, which is extremely important, the belief that becoming prosperous, the route to do it is through honest human effort and education. It is not through taking what is not yours. Jews have never converted people. Like,
That's right.
Buddhists, we don't convert. That's the way we are. I have, whenever I go to Tel Aviv, and I've done that twice. I can't say whenever I go to Tel Aviv, I go to David Ben Gurion's house. I think he was one of the most extraordinary men of the last century. A truly visionary figure. And I've done something which many Israelis haven't done. And I doubt if my friend India has done it. I've been to his house and I've been to his library. I recommend all of you that you do that. Why? Because the single biggest section of the library in the home of the founder of the state of Israel is for Hindu and Buddhist texts. They're deeply influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism. All Indians are fascinated by the kibbutz, the idea of the kibbutz, of living in a commune and building a future literally, building a nation out with your bare hands. This is something we deeply admire. To many of you, the similarities between Hanukkah and Diwali, the lighting of lamps, would have been obvious. Now, the Prime Minister Netanyahu talked of us being democracies. So, Prime Minister Ben Gurion lived the end of his life in a kibbutz called Sde Borka. I haven't been there, but I know people who have been there. In his bedroom, which is now open to the public, there is one picture. Guess who that picture is? He used to see it every morning when he woke up. It is of Mahatma Gandhi. And in that, David Ben Gurion had written, the moral strength of all Eastern nations seems to be probably entrenched in India's great leader, Mahatma Gandhi. This unrivaled leader is leading that nation's freedom fight using his weapon called ahimsa. Think about this. This was written today. You might say that we are good friends, but this was written in the 1930s. That is something quite remarkable. So it is my view, my personal view, that what we see today is actually a historical correction. There was a period in which our paths diverged a little, but today we are back on the same path. We are also a nation that shares our visions of, we have a shared vision of modernity. Alone in our neighborhood, probably, we are the only 2 countries which are multi-party democracies, which believe in the rule of law, which have judicial review, which holds everybody in power accountable. We believe in treating the weaker sections of society, women, in a certain way. Alone in our neighborhoods. This is a remarkable similarity that we have. Now, let me come to technological and scientific cooperation, which we spoke about. The Israelis, when the Jewish people moved to what was then the province of Palestine in the Ottoman Empire, and then later became the state of Israel, through successive waves of migration for the Aliyahs. I was very struck by one thing, that when Jewish people first came to Israel, I read somewhere, the first things that they did was they set up a university, they set up a symphony orchestra. This is the first thing they did. When we became independent, what are the first things we did? We set up the Indian Institutes of Technology, like similar to somewhat like the Technion in Israel, and the Indian Institutes of Management and medical colleges. Again, a manifestation of fundamentally similar outlooks in life. We are both startup nations. We don't launch terror startups. We launch startups in technology, startups that make the lives of other people better. That is what India, and there's a very famous book on Israel called Startup Nation. And that is what our Prime Minister is focused on today, to create an ecosystem for startups in India. Israel made the deserts bloom, they drained the swamps. I don't know how many of you are aware of what Tel Aviv was like 120 years ago, whenever they came, when the first settlers came there, when the first Zionists returned. There was malaria, swamps, inhospitable terrain, and they turned that into this beautiful modern city, which I see today comparable to any city in the rest of the world, which compares with any city in the world. It's an absolutely staggering achievement, and that is what we admire and respect. Israel might be a military superpower. If you've noticed, I haven't said anything about the military until now, but it is an agricultural superpower. They have amazing amazing food products, fruits, horticulture, whatever you say. It is a water superpower. The technology in water treatment is phenomenal. It is a renewable energy superpower. It is in an area very dear to my heart, a superpower in reconstructive surgery, in medicine, in genetics. And the reason that I say all this is because that is where the future of the India-Israel relationship is going to be, in cooperating, in building good, productive economic enterprises that benefit people across the world. I read somewhere in one of these speeches, I wish I could have taken credit for that, but apparently in Silicon Valley, you hear little English between Hebrew and Hindi. There are so many Israelis. We are, as I said, very deeply influenced by the military achievements of Israel. I know that reading about the 6-Day War is something which all Indian soldiers do. We all know about the raid in Entebbe. And what this has taught us in India, and I think many of you in the room will agree with me, is that as much as we admire Israel's military prowess, I think what we learned from them is the idea that every life is important. The life of every Indian and every Israeli is important, and that no one gets left behind. They launched this raid to save some of their people, and we, in our own way, have tried to learn and replicate some of these characteristics. There's one striking similarity between Israeli and Indian militaries, which not many people are aware of. Casualty rates amongst junior officers are very high in both India and Israel. What it means is that both Indian and Israeli officers are taught to lead from the front. That is a shared culture that we have. I'm going to finish. I think as I said, I spared you my 1-hour speech because Gilad has already taken most of it. But I'll end with another story. I began with a story, I'll end with a story. This is a story of a young man called Moshe Holzberg, now 11 years old. All you might know about him. Now, the memory of 26/11 sears all Indians. The people from Pakistan came and shot 180 people in Bombay or more. I don't know how many people they shot. Amongst the people they shot, they attacked were Chabad House because they understood that this was an area where this would get them. They thought that they would get them. But let me tell you what the lasting lesson. We will survive 26/11. Okay? There's nothing. The only people who have lost in 26/11 is Pakistan. They are now seen as a pariah state and a terrorist state. We have survived. We have grown stronger. But the story is not about that. The story is about a woman called Sandra Samuels, who was the nanny of Moshe Holzberg. Israel gave Sandra Samuels honorary citizenship. To those of you who are not citizens of Israel, you will not appreciate the extent of that honor. It is the Israelis' way of saying, there's an ancient Israeli saying that if you save the life of one person, you save the life of a nation. And that is what the character of Israel is about. That they picked up this humble Indian caregiver and made her an honored citizen of Israel. That is what tells you what their character, that is in my view, that is what brings out the best in Israel. That is what demonstrates what they hold dear to them. That if you work with them, if they are your friends, then they are your friends. That is what Israel is about. Thank you very much. I have noted that you have expressed a desire to go to India, and I can only hope at this stage that you will be the Israeli ambassador to India, and I hope that I'm there to welcome you when you are there.
All right, let's get another round of applause for Dr. Ray. And one more for good measure for Mr. Gilad Katz. Thank you guys so much. So I think what we all learned today is that the roots between our two nations really go deep. And one little thing I wanted to mention, bouncing off of what Dr. Ray said, I am a first-generation American. My parents came from India, and I'm also a lawyer, so it goes in terms with that idea of that focus on education. And because this is an educational event, what we really want to do is open the floor up to anyone who has questions. So we're going to have a Q&A period. We expect it to go for about 30 minutes. And the way that we're going to structure this is anyone who has any questions for either Consul General is free to come up over to that little microphone over there and ask their question. The only parameters are these. The questions cannot be purely about American foreign policy. We're here to talk about India, and we're here to talk about Israel. So anything about that encapsulates these two nations or their relationship is fair game, and we want to keep it as open and objective as possible. So really, any questions that you have, please ask. And we're going to limit it to 3 questions per each Consul General. So 3 to Mr. Katz and 3 to Dr. Ray. And if anyone has questions, please come up to the microphone and let us know.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we would like to thank the 2 Consul Generals for being here with us. Along with that, we would like to thank each and every one of you for coming out today. Like my friend Nish just mentioned right now, we're going to limit it to just 3 questions per Consul General. So we would like to request the folks who have questions to line up here, and then we could entertain all the questions as we go along. And it's very important. This is not about American foreign policy. So please go ahead and ask the 2 Consul General questions as it relates to the 2 countries. Thank you. When you first begin, please introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
I'm Raja Prasad, kind of use all those things in terms of relationship between Israel and India. Of course, my profession is I teach pharmacy at University of Houston, so I don't know much about the politics of it. So historically, I just wanted to, I'm fascinated with that. How come the formal relationship between the two countries, which have, like I think I've seen on TV when I was young, kind of thing. I think people talk about the culture and all those things. How come they started so late in 1992? I mean, I'm just saying that what is the Indian aspect of it? What is the Israeli aspect of it? So if you can enlighten a little bit on that one. I understand, there may be political ramifications on that, but just at least for the people who are here, it will give us a little bit of limelight on that one.
You want me to answer?
Both. Yes.
You want? Okay. I'll take the first point. So that's a very good question, and there are we are both democracies, India and Israel. Right? Can you hear me now?
No.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So we are both. So that's a very good question. Thank you, and we are. It's a very interesting question. The reason that it's interesting is that this is about the answer of that lies partly in geopolitics and partly in something else which we share with Israel. As countries, we have a capacity for introspection and course correction. Okay, so let me give you an example of what I mean by that. We are today one of the most open economies of the world, one of the fastest growing economies of the world, etc., etc. This is not always the case. Until the 1970s or 80s, there was a derogatory term called the Hindu rate of growth, which meant that you grew at 2.5% to 3% per year, and that was it. Somehow, that nation of 2.5 to 3, the nation with a growth rate of 2.5 to 3.5%, became a nation that grew at 7%, 6%, because there was a change in policies. The change in policies occurred because we adopted a certain course in economic decision making or economic thought in the 1950s. Remember that we had not ruled ourselves for maybe 1,000 years. Okay, the people who sat on the throne of Delhi were either Englishmen, or before that, there were a couple of Mughal emperors for a few hundred years who had Indian mothers. But before that, they were Turks. Before that, they were we were ruled by something called the slave dynasty. Okay, so the language of the Mughal court was Turkish and Farsi. So it is important to remember that we do not have that we are a young nation in that sense too, and we chose particular courses of action in many things, in education, in economics, in foreign policy, and we constantly evaluated what we were doing. And I think the decision to first launch relations with Israel, it is not there was an Israeli consulate in Mumbai well into the in the 1950s and 1960s for a fairly long time. So it is not as if India was hostile to the state of Israel. That's it was not maybe as friendly as it is today, but it is incorrect to say that there was hostility. Right? Well, in 1971, all of you are here in America and talking of the benefits and the great success that America has bestowed upon you and the opportunity America have. Many of you may or may not remember, in America in 1971 sent the 7th Fleet to threaten us in the Bay of Bengal. Okay. So, President Richard Nixon used unspeakable terms while describing India. So mature nations, capable nations, have the ability to look themselves unflinchingly in the mirror and say that, this is what we need to do. We need to have a relationship with Israel, and that's what we are doing.
Anupam, mentioned that we had a consulate in Mumbai, and I think that is not well known. That tells a lot of where we stood long before 1992 when the relations became official. But I think there are at least a couple of other reasons. First one, Anupam just mentioned it briefly, relates to the geopolitical arena of I would say, even the politics of the international society. I'm just recalling that at the late 1980s, the beginning of 1990s, the communist world, I could say, was defeated. And that had a lot of impact on the entire international community, even though it didn't really affect, at least not directly, not us and not India, but it had indirect effect. That's one of the reasons. And another reason, we're talking about two nations, two peoples. At the end of the day, we're talking about people, and people, like the nature of people, it takes time until it's ripe. You cannot force history or try to fasten it when it isn't right all the time. I'll just give you an example from a personal life. It's an anecdote, but I think it shows we can also understand where I'm going to. I dated my wife for almost 2 years until we got married. And the question is, why didn't we get married after a year? And the answer is, it wasn't right. Sometimes time makes things, changes things, that it should take more time so it would be right and right. And I think that in the beginning of the 1990s, the time was right, it was ripe, it was made, and now 25, 26 years later, we can see why it succeeded.
Thank you. I believe you have a question. And I don't see a line behind him, so I would like to encourage people. Please don't feel shy. Let's do this.
My question is to Dr. Ray. How does India balance the relationship between Israel and Palestine? Because we know that Israel and Palestine do not get along with each other, and there are policies that Israel is pursuing with India may or may not like it. But how do we maintain the relationship and balance between the two nations?
I don't think there's a question of balance. We do what is in India's interests. If India's requests require it to be balanced, we will be balanced. There's an old saying by a very old British diplomat, I think it was Lord Palmerston, who said that nations don't have permanent friends or enemies. Nations have permanent interests. India and Israel will do what is in their interests. Having said that, our position is very clear. That we believe that in a two-state solution, that both Israel and Palestine will have are separate nations and need to exist as that. Now, having said that, I don't see where the problem really is in this. Israel also exists, has accepted through the Oslo Accords and others the right of Palestine to exist. There is no ambiguity in what the Israelis are saying about that. While we don't agree with many of the things that they do, and like they don't agree with many of the things that we do, we are on, and as Indians here, you have to understand that we are on slippery ground. This is a question that is not just has ramifications for India. This is a tricky question globally. Okay. no other people in the world have been targeted for extinction in the way the Jewish people were. People who are not Jewish people do not understand what it is like to lose 50% of your population in the course of 3 or 4 years. Nobody has faced that thing. So there is a historical element in this debate which cannot be ignored. We wish the state of Palestine extremely well. Our Prime Minister was there last week. We are one of the strongest supporters of the Palestine state, of the state of Palestine. We want Israel and Palestine to work out their problems with each other. We have very big stakes on the question of the right to self-determination. We are not a disinterested party in that. So we face common threats, Israel and India, from radical Islam of a sort which is unfortunately or fortunately is not something which we can dissociate from the geopolitics of that region. We have to take a very clear and hard-headed look at where our interests lie. We have no interest in making enemies, but we have to be very clear about who our friends are. And friendship ultimately is, as you know, friendship is about doing. It's not just about speaking. This is not a PR exercise. People are dying in India every day. An officer and 2 men died in Kashmir just last week. To us sitting here in the comfort of Houston, it might mean nothing. It might mean a statistic. But they are my people and they are dying. And they are being killed by radical Islamists. And I feel strongly about it.
I would just like to add one more thing. Since the Oslo Accords in 1993, and until I would say 2010, that means we're talking about more than a decade and a half, the philosophy of the paradigm in Israel was very simple. And it said, peace at the end of the day will lead for security. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu didn't agree with that paradigm, and he said the opposite. Security will lead to peace. When saying that, he told every leader he met, every conference he spoke, every meeting he took part, he said he is willing to meet the president of the Palestinians, Mahmoud Abbas, anywhere, any place, anytime. Our hand is extended, and for some reason, we have a lot of theories why. For some reason, the Palestinians have yet to decide what they want at the end of the day. Do they want a last living peace with 2 states, or don't they want such a thing? Until they answer themselves, it's in their hands. We are waiting at the table. Benjamin Netanyahu said any time he will come to any place, he'll go to Ramallah, but he will not give up an inch of the security of the state of Israel. Now the ball is in their hands, in the Palestinians' hands. They will have to decide, and I think they haven't yet decided. And it will take time. It's up to them, until they will decide. We, the Israelis, the government of Israel, the Prime Minister, we will not give up on our, as a sovereign country, on our right to protect the lives of Israelis. That is the basic issue that is now on the table. And they will have to decide.
Thank you. Now we would like to invite our next questioner. It'd be great if you can please introduce yourself before you ask the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Consuls. My name is Swami Jasankar, and I'm from Houston. I have this question. Essentially, this is very specific, but you may choose to answer or not answer. But I just wanted to bring it to your attention that recently, over the past year and a half, there have been security breaches into the Indian campuses of the armament, and which have led to many casualties. And I know Israel has a very strong technology in defending the perimeters of like a building or access. And my personal line of work also, I do similar work. So I was just wondering, has there been any cooperation between Israel and India for transferring this technology and putting it to use, deploying it in forward places like Kashmir and other places? Thank you.
This is what I decided with myself. I talked with my superiors. I really do not want to talk about the security issue, not because we don't have what to say or how to answer. This is a very, very delicate issue. It has a lot of ramifications on lives of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. I think the best answer is on the ground. You see that we have treaties, agreements between the two countries surrounding defense and military issues. Those agreements help both sides protect millions of citizens, of innocent citizens, and I think that these issues should be in the shadow. That's my opinion, and that is the opinion of Israel in most of the defense military issues.
I agree with him. I'll only just tell you this much, that we have great respect for our diaspora. A lot of ideas come from the diaspora, and as you know, our Prime Minister adopts them. It's a very good idea. If it's occurred to you, it must have occurred to somebody in Delhi too.
Next question, please.
My name is Oscar Pollard. I'm initially from the West Indies. Thank you. I'm initially from the West Indies. Just about the time, I think we have in common, Dr. Ray, cricket. I come from the time of Clive Lloyd. In fact, we used to visit the same home, checking out two sisters. I believe that Israel has been developing some activity in cricket as well. At least that's what I heard. Good. My question, I have been developing a concern recently about food security. I'm interested in finding out what happens in Israel, the Israeli experience, and the same thing in India, and how, for the sake of argument, you might be collaborating even now. In the case of India, I guess it was about 2 years ago or so, when Prime Minister Modi was addressing the crowd. One of the people who was affected, a farmer, got with a tree and hung himself by a rope. We have incidents in this country now of people committing suicide in the Midwest. I have a feeling that one of the great challenges of our time is to deal with security. And I know it's a long question, long answer, but I'd be very grateful if you gentlemen could make available to me some way that I can pursue information in your countries. Thank you.
Food security is one of the basic issues that every country, every state has to take in mind. Mao Zedong, once he was asked why there isn't any democracy in China, and his answer was that he has to feed more than 1 billion people. And the interviewer asked him about democracy. He says, there are things more important than democracy. That's what he said. Food security is not only by providing food, it's by providing education. Prime Minister Netanyahu always says, don't give people the fish, give them the rod. They have to know how to fish. If you give them the fish itself, the food, they will stop thinking, they will stop educating themselves, they won't become constructive. Saying that, we know that today the population is on a rise, and one has to understand that there's a very big difference. I heard someone saying, and I agree with you, there's a big difference between a country that has a little more than 8 million people and a country that has more than 1 billion and 300 million people. It's a different creature altogether. That means our problem of food security, and we do have such a thing, is not comparable to the food security that has India. But combine together the technology, the wisdom, the capability of the leaders and the people themselves, and as I mentioned earlier, we are talking about 25 centers of excellence that many of them are focused on food security. The problem is that people that are now in hunger, that don't have the food now, they can't wait. I'm talking about a solution that will be made in about 10, 15, 20 years from now. It's a very challenging problem. It is not easy. One has to understand that it will take time, but eventually I think both the countries, and I think that we, Israel and India, will be the spearhead in the world in the solution, finding the solution for the food, for the security of food. Until then, we'll have to, at the end of the day, each of our countries will have to see and deal how she can at least, it won't vanish, but how to deal with it and to try to lessen it as much as possible. But I really do believe that in the coming future, in the decade, next decade maybe, this issue will be maybe not 100% with a solution, but will be very much advanced where we stand today.
Well, I don't study. I'm not studied to be an economist, but I think there was a guy called Malthus about 2 centuries ago, and Malthus talked about the fact that how the carrying capacity of the world was finite, and that he said that agricultural production actually rose by arithmetic progression, whereas population rose by geometrical progression. So there was this term called the Malthusian economics, the economics of scarcity, which has been disproven time and again. The farmers who kill themselves in India are not killing themselves because of food security. It is agrarian distress, and they are different things. There is no food insecurity in India as such. The last great famine in India was in 1943, and my father, who survived that famine, told me stories of how, skeletons of people who died were lying about on the ground. In India, we went through something called the Green Revolution in 1967, in which Americans helped us. And then we went through a second Green Revolution. We went through something called a White Revolution. The story of self-sufficiency of food in India is one of those stories which hasn't been given sufficient publicity to. Indians today do not die of hunger. Then why is this guy hanging himself? The answer is, he's broke. The farms that he has are not economically viable. And what is the reason for that agrarian distress? The reason for agrarian distress, there's a whole lot of literature on that. It's fragmentation of land holdings. Once you have insufficient land holdings, you are unable to access credit, unable to farm on scale. You are unable to do many of the things which make agriculture a productive livelihood. This is a cost of modernization. When people switch from from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy to a services economy, or in some cases leapfrog one, there will be people who will lose out. And the way to deal with them is by having a social security system, by having a security net, by having healthcare insurance, by having pensions, by having unemployment benefits. That is where we are focusing on today. I don't know if you saw our last budget. We have just launched the world's largest health intervention program. Now, you said that there are suicides going out here in the Midwest. I think the best way to understand the lot of the Indian farmer, I myself, my mother runs a farm, is to look at the steel workers who are out of jobs in the United States, or the industrial, I read about these Rust Belt towns where the jobs have left because production has moved elsewhere. Now, that is what has happened to the Indian agricultural center in India. Food availability in India is at an all-time high. I don't think Indians die of hunger anymore. Okay, so there's no food security as such is not an issue. I mean, there was an issue in between of food distribution, but we are handling that too. Agrarian distress is a structural problem in the economy, which we will, as a nation, have to tackle. I mean, it's extremely distressing. I mean, that's all that I can say about it. We are an open society. We are not trying to drive the problems under a carpet. We are facing the problem as it is. This is a big thing in electoral politics in India. And I think all of us understand that this is a structural issue which needs structural solutions. As I said, the solutions are things we are already working on. Unemployment insurance, social security, healthcare insurance. It's only then that we will have a solution. I think we will see a lessening of these unfortunate and very tragic developments. I hope that answers your question.
Of all the questions that I would have personally thought that were going to be asked of the two consul generals here, this was probably the most off the beating path, but we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And with that having been said, we began the Q&A session of our program, and we said that it was only going to be 30 minutes. The two consul generals have been very generous in answering the questions. So with that in mind, we only have time for one last question, and I would like to apologize to the ones that won't get to ask a question, but let's go ahead and do this. Thank you.
My name is Sushma Khan, and I just wanted to first of all say thanks to you. Both of you had very inspiring comments. Very admirable how you narrated the need for relationships between individuals and countries. I just wanted to bring back the topic about terrorism. The whole world right now is tainted with terrorism, and some of us really personally feel it. Those of us who were in the US when 9/11 happened. But also I have my friends and colleagues here from Kashmir. I don't know if some of you would stand up. Who have felt that pain, and they see it. You talked about it. So I wanted to understand how can the two nations not only united with the same values and purpose, but also the common goal of eradicating terrorism. So those of us who have children who are mothers and wives and daughters feel secure. We feel secure about our brothers and families. And so what can we do not only at the country level, state level, but also as citizens? I heard you say that you have paratrooping training. We don't see that in India. But how do we become more secure? How do we become more purposeful and prepared? Because it's not going to go away. So if you can share some thoughts. I have not been back to Kashmir in more than 30 years. And when my husband and children did, I was frightful. I was holding my heart in my hand. So if you can share some examples and how the two countries can also help more, not only in India, Israel, and the US.
So I'm sorry, I don't have any good news. So Plato said that only the dead have seen the end of war. The freedom that you enjoy in the United States today. So let me give you some statistics. In if I'm not mistaken, in the Civil War in the United States, 6% of the male population of the United States died. Fighting about an idea. Now, I don't want to get into what was right and what was wrong, but if you just move it to today's casualty rates, just think of how many men would die in a population of 300 million. I think if it's 6%, you come to the numbers. The point I'm trying to make is that the cost, look at the US casualty rates in World War II, in World War I. Freedom, much as many of you here are very distant from, I hate to put it as bluntly as that, are distant from paying the price of that freedom. They are, I would put it in very plain language. You enjoy the freedom that other mothers are paying with the lives of their children. So I don't see any easy solutions. There are many counter-terrorism strategies, many counter-insurgency strategies. There are theories of human security. There are people who believe that world government has all. So there's a lot of thought has gone into this kind of thing. There are in the United States, for instance, when it went to Afghanistan, there was this huge debate between what was called the CT versus coin debate. Counterterrorism versus counterinsurgency. Now, very simply put, the issue was, and this is the debate in the mightiest country in the world, with the mightiest intellectuals, which has the best brains in the world, come here. So the debate was, should we just kill the leaders of the guys who are the bad groups? Okay, just identify them and knock them off one by one. That is very bluntly put what CT is. Counterinsurgency, on the other hand, is a much broader strategy. And as far as I know, that you invest in schools or whatever you invest in. Now that there never was a satisfactory solution to that debate. What I can tell you from personal experience in India, my father, I have personal experience in this. My father was a specialist in counterterrorism. Okay, so I know a little bit of what I'm talking about. He had a PhD in that, and he spent about 10 to 15 years of his life fighting for India in the Northeast. He was an IAS officer. And he served. So in 1965, he went in, there's a town called Aizawl in northeastern India, which was bombed by the Indian Air Force because the people of that area, the Mizos, had declared independence. And then there was a rebellion. A guy called Lal Denga led that rebellion. My father served there for 6 years, and he went in with the first helicopter load of soldiers who went in to restore Indian control over Aizawl. This was in 1965. In 1969 to 72, he was the district commissioner. Then he actually led from the front. Many people we know died. His colleagues, subordinates. And fast forward to 1985. Rajiv Gandhi reaches out to the Mizo National Front. There is a peace accord. And the MNF fights elections. And Lal Denga is elected as Chief Minister of Mizoram. When he becomes Chief Minister of Mizoram, he calls my father, an old enemy, and says, "Will you come and be my Chief Secretary? Because I know that you are a good man and that you fought for a cause much bigger than yourself." I'm sorry that I digressed into this personal story, but that is what I can't talk of the global experience, but I can tell you about the Indian experience, that our record in dealing terrorism is second to none in the world. We have learned a lot from the Israeli experience, but we have a unique Indian model which seems to work. The long and the short of the Indian model is, whether it is Punjab, whether it is the left-wing extremists, whether it is Mizoram, Manipur, Tripura, Nagaland, wherever you are, the Indian state never gives up. No matter what you throw at it, no matter what the casualty rates are, we will keep coming back. We will not give up. If, on the other hand, you extend your hand of, you join the Indian system, you participate in elections, accept the democratic model, accept democracy, every post in the world is open to you. We have no problems in having people who belong to any of these groups become the head of our militaries, the head of our intelligence forces. Once you are with us, you are with us. Okay. That is the model that we have developed in India. You're from Kashmir. Okay. I belong to something called the Indian Foreign Service. We have a brother service, the Indian Administrative Service, or a sister service, or whatever. About 2 years ago, the person who came first in the civil service exam in India was a Kashmiri Muslim doctor. Okay. That is what we are about finally. That you give that boy a chance to come to attain the highest positions in India and not worry about where he is from. So a combination of I would say unflinching determination to not be strong-armed, and an equally unflinching determination to make democracy and opportunity work for everybody is the Indian model in this.
I think that if we would, I would just change the names of the places. I think 1-to-1 it will be the same in Israel. I just would like to say one other thing. In my experience, and I was a paratrooper. My father was a paratrooper. A week ago, one of my nephews became an officer. He's not a paratrooper. That's his problem. What I'm saying is that the most important thing before trying to fight terrorism, before that, is to understand and know that what you're fighting for is justice, is right, and at the end of the day, you know that what you are doing is not just for the benefit of yourself, it's for the country and for the nation. It's easy to say, it's very hard when you're in the midst of a terror attack, a war, an operation, whatever it is, it's very, very hard. Sometimes a few of my personal friends were killed during action. I was in the Gaza Strip during actions. I was a couple of times in clashes of fire. No one really likes that. But the terror organizations worldwide, they know their aim is not to defeat you, because I think eventually they know they won't defeat the countries, the peoples. That's too big. They want to frighten the society. They want to make them afraid to get out of the houses, to go on buses, to go see movies. That's what they want to do. Israel, time and again, even in the worst times of terror, and we're talking about, there was a month, I remember that month because I was called back to duty in the army. More than 200 Israelis were killed in 1 month. And now we're talking about, as I said, 8.8 million people are Israelis, 200 people. It's a number that you can't really grasp. But Israel has never, just as Anupam said, Israel will never give up. We will never surrender. That is our heritage. We will never, even if we are in, I would say, in a situation that it is almost impossible, we will never give up. We remember what happened 70 years ago with the Holocaust. Half of my family were murdered in the Holocaust. We don't have any other option. It's all we live. And I would say, it's not nice to say, but we will live for the next generation at least on the sword, because without the sword that we have, we won't live. We will never start wars for the sake of wars. And when we do mistakes, and we do mistakes, sometimes the state of Israel does mistakes. And we, by accident, without any purpose, we kill people that were innocent. We take the responsibility. And we compensate them. We try our utmost to at least try and lower the mistakes, the percentage of the mistakes. But that will never, we will never, and I'm talking about, it's not only me, I'm talking about the environment, the Israeli theme will never surrender to terror because we cannot afford that. Besides that, as I said, we really do believe in what we do. We believe that the land of Israel belongs to the Israelites. We believe that without the land of Israel, we will have no future. So at the end of the day, it may take a year, it may take 10, it may take 100 years. But at the end of the day, if it won't be from my generation, it will be my son's generation, if not my grandson or my great-grandson. One day, I know, I am certain of it, that the terror against humanity will be demolished.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the question and answer session of our program. We're still going. We're going to recognize the two Consul Generals. We would like to thank all the folks for asking such great questions, and definitely the two CGIs for giving such heartfelt and candid answers. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. First of all, I want to thank all the audience members who came and who participated. The event would not be possible without you all, so thank you so much. I want to honor both of the Consul Generals for giving us their valuable time. So FIS is presenting both CGs with a commemorative plaque presentation. So, Mr. Katz, thank you. Thank you. And of course, one for Dr. Ray as well. Thank you so much. Your answers were I think we all have a better understanding now of the relationship between these two countries. So I would also be remiss if I didn't thank India House for helping us set up this fantastic event, for providing this venue, particularly Mr. Milani and Colonel Vipin Kumar, who were instrumental in setting up all of this. I want to thank all the FIS staff and board who are all here. Get a round of applause for their hard work. Krishna Loverlala, our chairman, who helped me set all of this up. It was fantastic. All the Indian and Asian newspapers that helped publicize the event. And finally, I want to thank the young volunteers. In fact, I'd like to invite all of them up on the stage. So these guys were the background for this event. They made this happen. All of them are from high school, and they've taken valuable time out of their Sunday to come here and make this event happen. So we should give a tremendous round of applause to them. Yeah. All right, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for making this event possible.
Memorial to the soldiers in Delhi.